Hey everybody, I'm Chucky2009. Today we're going to be MIG welding some pipe.
Yes, we are.
This is Stephen Leone, Georgia Trade School Instructor. And so I understand from what little I know about MIG welding pipe, it is often done in like shop type fabrication assembly things because it's fast.
Yeah, so basically it's done in a shop, in a 1G position. They roll it, they get it done. It's good for fab shops.
As fast as possible.
Fast as possible. Get it done, get it out the door, and get it to the customer. So we've got some Schedule 86-inch pieces of pipe here. We're going to put a root in it, and we're going to fill it up with MIG. I'm going to show you some weave patterns, and then we're going to cap it off with either 2 or 3 nice fat honking stringers. So basically what happens is we've got this burr on here from the lathe. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a file and we're going to remove that. So, like so. And we'll just go back and forth on this until all that's gone. You're more than welcome to take a grinder if you can fit it in there and get it out. Whatever you got to do, peel it off, rip it off. But a file is the rounded side or just a regular round file is a perfect tool to use that for.
Dude, this file was not that great when it was new like 5 years ago.
I can tell.
So what was that for?
Just making sure that all of the burrs get off on both sides, you know, die grind the inside, file the inside.
And especially because this is big, I would assume the one should be very careful there's no like rust on the bevel or heavy paint and crap and whatever else on the outside of the pipe.
Yeah, you want to keep it as clean as possible, get areas that you're going to tie the welding to be rust free, free of all the contaminants, free of all burrs. You know, you're going to weld it up and you know, it's going to be bent, it's going to be inspected, so you want it to be as perfect as possible. So if you've got to go over it a couple of times with various tools, then, you know, take the time so that way when you weld it, you're not wasting time. All right, so we have cleaned up our pipe. You can see anywhere the weld is going to tie into on the root, on the outside, on the bevel surface, everywhere that weld is going to touch or be affected, tie into the metal, we have cleaned properly. Now, what we have in here is a 1/8 TIG rod. That's our spacing. You can do multiple different spacings. There's hundreds of people going to tell you hundreds of different things, but for the purpose of this video today, we are going to space it 1/8 of an inch. Our machine settings are about 185 wire feed speeds, 17.5 volts. That seems to be a good setting to run, but like I said, depending on the gas you're running, depending on the pipe, the fit up, you know, those things might change, but under 200 wire speed and under 20 volts is usually pretty good. This pipe does not have a landing on it. If it had a landing, those settings would be much different. But this is going to be the 1G position, which is going to be a downhill weld. We are going to weld this from 12 down to 6 and roll it accordingly. So that being said, no landing and downhill, you know, we want those settings to be as low as possible to facilitate it not blowing through the root.
If you think that sounds low for probably what, very roughly 1/2 inch wall thickness pipe, remember, we're not welding the entire thing in one pass. We are essentially just sort of stitching up that gap. Anybody who's ever, you know, hacked together a truck exhaust or something with a 110 MIG welder, like what I got started doing, knows about that. And then we'll work from there. It's going to be multiple passes to fill those bevels.
Yeah, it's going to take time to fill it up, and we'll probably adjust the settings coming outward. But as far as the root is concerned, we're going to stay at 185 and around 17.5 volts.
You got any secrets for tacking this up properly?
Yeah, so when you tack it up, you want to make sure, you want to take your hand, obviously make sure the parts are cool, which in this case they are. And you want to make sure that when you rub your finger, you don't feel an offset. Basically, you want the pipe to sit like this. You don't want to feel the pipe is shifted in either way. So what you can do is you take your fingers and you just rub them around, maybe rub at 12 and 6, then 3 and 9, and just feel. Now, depending on if this was cut with a track torch or cut by a machine, is going to determine if the pipe got warped or not. So, you know, you just want to pay attention to things like that. It's not always going to be perfect, but you want to get it as perfect as you possibly can. So when we tack this, what we're going to do okay, is we're gonna take the wire and put my gloves on. We'll stick the wire out just a hair, and obviously because there's a gap, what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to position that wire to be up on the bevel at some point. So what we'll do is we will start the puddle on the top and then let it fall to the bottom and try to push it through a hair. Tacks are not super vital to the root because you can always grind them out if they don't get all the way through. But in order to start the puddle, we're gonna start on the top and we're gonna fall to the bottom of the other bevel. All right, so you're gonna have to walk that back and forth a little bit to get it going. But after I put these other tacks in, I'll let you guys get a look at what these look like. Now, as you can see right there, the pipe shifted, so don't rush yourself. You want to take your time, take your gloves off, make sure that you get back to a good fit up. And as far as the tacks go, if you've watched any of the past pipe videos that we've done, you always want to quarter them. So you put a tack in at 12, then come across and put a tack in at 6, then go 3 or 9. Doesn't matter, but you want to go 12, 6, 9, or 3 in a cross formation. After you put your 2 tacks in, go ahead and pull your spacer out. Make sure your gap is consistent. Let him get a shot of that.
Looks great.
Right? Then go ahead and do your other tacks. You have to take a piece of angle so it doesn't roll. And then you can put them in a 5G or a 1G position. What you're looking for on these tacks, you want to check and make sure that they're all penetrated. So as you can see, we've got nice convexity to this weld here. All right, that's what you're looking for. Feel for your gap. We're still smooth. All right, you want to make sure that you have penetrated through all the way. Now I'm going to show you how to feather these tacks with a grinder, so that way when you tie back in on either side, they're going to fuse into these tacks. What you don't want on a pipe test, the last thing you want, okay, you don't want to have a visual difference between your tacks and your actual runs, meaning the section that you ran and then the part of your tack. You don't want to see, you don't want to have your inspector be able to come over to your pipe and say, hey, I can see where your 4 tacks are. In order to do that, to have them tie in, you need to take a grinder and you need to feather them out. You can do it with a file, but I'm going to show you how to do it with a grinder. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you, I'm going to take this cut disc. Now be careful, with a heavy wall pipe, you don't necessarily need to clamp it down, but just be mindful of the cut disc. This is dangerous. So safety first, have your glasses on, gloves on, everything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to feather either side. Now what that's going to look like is I'm just going to take the cut disc and I'm just going to V into it a little bit. That's it. Just cut into it a hair so that way I can tie in very easily on both sides.
So if I'm following you here, you're saying these tack welds are essentially, almost an impenetrable wall of material to tie into because they're, got like a bulge on the start and finish. So you're trying to remove that bulge so it's a smooth transition from the weld into the tack.
Absolutely, yeah, because the goal here is that it all looks the same.
Yeah.
And so in order to do that, you need to cut into those tacks so that way when you tie in, it fuses in correctly. So just slightly, depending on the thickness and the width of the actual tack itself, that'll determine how much you need to get into it. So we'll go ahead and finish these other ones up.
Cool.
Now another point I want to make, if you see a tack that you feel like, hey, you know what, maybe that thing is going to bust when I go to weld it, you have 2 options. Either weld that side first, or go ahead and while you've got it in position, re-tack it. You don't need to grind it out, but just go ahead and re-tack it.
As with many things in life, when you ignore a problem, it becomes a bigger problem.
Yes, and that's the last thing you want is a bigger problem.
Guys, it's raining, sorry.
We're in the middle of a thunderstorm. All right, so with it being a 1G test, you have 2 types of 1G. One's on a roller where you actually have a pedal that will roll the fixture that you're on. But in this case, we can't emulate that, so you are actually permitted in a 1G test to roll the pipe. It's very common for fab shops to give you a 1G test knowing that all of their pipe is going to be in position, knowing that you can roll it. They're not going to ask you to do some odd 45-degree 6G angle. So all that means is we are going to roll this pipe throughout the video to always maintain a flat position. Now, if you feel comfortable rolling off the side here, that's also fine. That's still 1G. You don't always have to weld everything flat, but in this case, I'll probably roll and weld down the sides. So we're gonna go ahead and put this root in. What we're looking for here, all right, because the wire speed and the voltage is so low, what we're gonna actually be able to do is slightly oscillate the puddle back and forth, and even though it doesn't have a landing, it is more than likely not gonna blow through. So we've got half our root in. Now we're gonna go ahead and put the other half in. You know what you're looking for, you're just looking for penetration, tie into your tacks. If you gotta get your grinder out and feather some of your tacks a little better, go ahead and do that. But you're just looking for consistency all the way throughout. All right, so we've got our root in here, just a couple cues, things to look for. You know, you wanna be penetrated, you don't wanna see the bevel edge. You definitely don't wanna be higher than, you know, 1/8 of an inch. You know, you don't want to have some massive wampus, you know, 1/2 inch weld reinforcement on the back. You know, you want to be flush and up to 1/8. Depending on what the inspection calls for, you know, you got to abide by that. So we've got our root in. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and kick this the welder up a little bit, turn the wire speed up, turn the voltage up, and we're going to start weave filling. And then we will stringer cap this guy.
That looks pretty good. So I'm sure one of the things you're looking for is that there's no visible original edges of the pipe, so we know they've all been consumed.
Yeah, you don't want to see, like I said, on your tie-ins, you don't want to see your tie-ins, you don't want to see visible edges, you know, you want to make sure you've penetrated into the whole pipe. You know, we'll make the hot pass kind of wider, just cover it up, and then at that point it'll be too big to run a downhill weave. So at that point, then we'll start running stringers in there, and basically we're just filling this guy up until we're ready to cap it with maybe 3-4 stringers. All right, so basically what we're looking for on this weave hot pass is you're looking for penetration on the sides, making sure it's tied in. If you need to turn your voltage up or your wire speed up, go ahead and adjust. It shouldn't be cold lapping. You want it to be fused in like it is also in this section too. So you're just looking for good fusion. What now we're gonna do here is put the pre-cap in. That's gonna be 3 stringers. So we're gonna tie into the toe here on the edge, lay a stringer in the middle, and then tie another toe in on the other side, and then we'll be ready for our cap. All right, so we have run our 3-stringer pre-cap. At this point, now all we're gonna do is we're gonna cover up the edges. So you wanna stay pretty tight, so you shouldn't need more than 3 to finish this guy off. You're just gonna have to hold the middle one a little longer to fill up any low spots. Another thing I wanna mention, not everything always goes perfect. So on pipe tests, General rule of thumb is you're allowed to use a grinder. If you can't use a grinder and you need to use a file, go ahead and file your high spots. If you need to file down some tie-ins, like if you wanted to file this down a little bit, it's more than ample to be run over with a weld, but if you wanted to, if you want to score your edges a little bit with a file so you can see where you run over, you know, it's not always going to run perfect, and that's not the purpose of these videos. These videos are to help you get to a certified point, but do what you can to help yourself. Use your file, use your grinder, use your chisel, use any tool that you can to help yourself be prepared. So what we're going to do here is we are going to run a weld on the edge, a weld on the middle, and another weld on the edge, just like the pre-cap, 3 stringers. Cover the edge up, fill up the middle, cover the other edge up.
So our settings were 393 inches a minute and 22.5 volts.
All right, so we have officially capped. One thing I want to say about the tie-ins on the cap, if we get a shot of this right here, do you see how these are staggered? What happens is, in order to not build up a large amount of surface area, you want to stagger your tie-ins, meaning carry them out, one high, one middle, one low. If you try to tie them all in across in the same spot, what's going to happen is they're going to crown really, really severely. So always stagger your tie-ins. So we've got a nice 3-stringer cap, all tied in. Bevel edges are clipped. We're not over 1/8 of an inch. Scrape your BBs off, wire brush it, and hopefully the company or the inspector that you're taking the test for is pleased with your work.
Wonderful. Thank you for supplying your time for this demonstration.
Absolutely.
Links in the description. What's up, guys? I'm Chucky2009. Here's my buddy Stephen Leone from the Georgia Trade School. And what are we going to be doing today, Stephen?
All right, we're going to be welding some 6-inch Schedule 80 pipe coupons. And the way that we are going to weld that is we're going to put a MIG root with a flux core cap. This is becoming very common for pipe fitters and fabrication companies and fab shops. It's a very high production way of doing it. What I mean by that is it's fast, it gets stuff done, you don't have to TIG weld it or stick weld it all the way out. I'm not saying you won't ever have to, but wire welding is fast, you can turn it up. We're gonna weld this in a 1G position, which means that you can roll it as you weld it. And a lot of the welding procedure specifications allow for it to be a 1G roll, because in a fab shop, you know, you're gonna work on pipe stands and then you're gonna be able to move it around, and then you're gonna ship it out to the people to install it. So we're going to do a MIG root and a flux core cap, and here in just a minute I'm going to show you how to clean up, take all this junk off of it.
Yes, this is very exciting, because if I'm following what you're saying here, this isn't the type of thing that's like, well, it's theoretical, you know, it's good to know. This is real world, like, will, if you go to the right place, get you a job and get you making some good money.
Absolutely. And a lot of people think, oh, well, it's pipe and it's 1G, it can't be that hard. But as you're going to see on this root, we're not going to put any landing on it. It's very easy to blow through, so hopefully we can give you some tips to get ready for a test like this.
Cool.
And what we're going to do is we are going to just remove some of these burrs, so he's going to get a couple good shots of this.
Alright, so it looks like you're, just trying to remove any layer between the base metal and the weld you're going to put in?
Yeah, so if you see any area where that weld's going to tie in, like the root, so you have a nice, you know, thin layer there where we have got all the paint and the mill scale off. Outside where the cap is going to tie into, we've removed anything that's going to get in the way, any mill scale paint, rust, dirt, water, etc. And of course, obviously, the actual groove angle of the pipe itself. So, you know, if you get a good shot of it together right there, anywhere that weld is going to touch, anywhere, we are clean on the inside as well. I'm going to go ahead and get it eye level with this while we tack. But the purpose or the goal here is we're going to take this rod or this wire, and we're going to start on the top of this bevel. And as I press the trigger, when the arc establishes, I'm going to pull it down. All right, it's just a really quick tack, nothing serious. Now we'll talk about machine settings and why that does that. So you have to set the machine pretty low, or relatively low, in order to get a tack in there with no landing. So we've got that tack in there, and we'll talk about quartering it. There's no landing on here, so you got to be real quick about it.
One term for this is knife edge bevel.
Yes, this is a knife edge bevel, absolutely. So you're gonna get some spit and some spatter, but we all know that it's MIG, just make sure you clean it up. So the way that we're gonna tack this in, okay, is we're gonna quarter it. So now that this will be our hypothetical 12, we're gonna come over to 6 o'clock. So 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 3 o'clock. Now, one thing I wanna mention, if we get a shot down inside this pipe, make sure that your pipe, when you rub your fingers along it, is staying flush. You don't want the pipe shifting either way, side to side. So this is a 1/8 inch spacer. Okay, you can do it with a 3/32. I prefer a 1/8. There's many different ways you can do this. I prefer a 1/8 because I feel it gives you a little more room for penetration, whereas if you do a 3/32, I mean, that's tight, and if at any point it closes up and you didn't get good penetration on the tack, that 3/32 can become 1/16 very quickly. So 1/8 is just easier to work with in a 1G position. So make sure you stay flush. After you put your first tack in, if you have to check it and adjust it, do so. For the most part, we're pretty good, so we're gonna go ahead and put our tack in now at 6 o'clock. After you put your 2 tacks in, go ahead and pull your spacer out. Should come out relatively easy. If it doesn't, no sweat, clip it, put a chisel in there, get it out of there. So we've got our tacks now at 12 o'clock and at 6 o'clock. Now we're gonna go ahead and do 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock. Again, make sure everything is still in order, and we'll go ahead and put those other tacks in. Everything is looking good. Now we'll do our final one. All right, so let's go ahead and get a look at what that looks like. So I've got tack 4, 3, 2, and 1. A consistent fit up for the most part all the way through. All right. Inside we have penetration on our tacks. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to feather these tacks so that way we can get optimal penetration on our tie-ins. So what happens is with these tacks is because they're rounded, right, what you want to do is you want to take a cut disc, okay, take my glove off, I can show you better. You want to take a cut disc and you want to kind of V into that tack a little bit on both sides. What that's going to do is as you're welding and as you come around to that tack, you're going to be able to tie in a lot better. If you don't do that now, what's going to happen is you're going to see easily visible tie-ins and tacks on your root. And obviously we all know for inspection reasons, or if you don't know, if your instructor comes over on a pipe and sees at 4 different locations, he can see your tacks, well, that's not good. You got to look at this from a standpoint of the company you're testing for, the instructor. Anybody can weld from here to here, but they want to see that you can weld the weak points, which are the tacks in this case. So if you don't groove them out and tie into them well, then you might fail a visual inspection, or worse, a bend test.
Yes, to kind of elaborate on what Steven's talking about, these tack welds, you can think of them as a giant mound of metal that you have to tie your puddle into and get everything fused into properly. And if you don't do it, he's about to show you, you might not properly fuse in there, so there's going to be a gap between your weld and where the tack weld is.
Absolutely. This is the weak point. You want to tie into it, and anything that you can do to make that easier is going to make for a better test. So I'll go ahead and grab this cut disc and show you. So just very lightly come in. You don't want to cut your landing wide open, or your lack of a landing wide open, your gap. So. All you're doing is just weakening that tack a little bit. You're weakening it so that way you can tie in. If you grind it too much, then what's going to happen is when you go to weld it, it's going to bust. It'll tear wide open. So for instance, if we feather this tack closest to us very heavily, and then I weld out the whole opposite side of the pipe, 99% of the time, that tack is going to bust wide open if you feathered it already. So be gentle, be delicate, just enough to be able to tie in. Just want to weaken it a little bit.
Remove some of that mass.
Yep, remove some of the mass, absolutely,
Nice.
so you can tie in. We're going to go ahead and set this up in a 1G position and run the route out and show you what that looks like. The way that I suggest that you run this route is downhill as much as possible. It's a 1G position, so if you weld flat with no landing, you're gonna more than likely glob it up really heavy on the backside. So the optimal way to run this, I feel, is downhill. You're more than welcome to try it flat. But like I said, you run the risk of it, gravity pulling it down. So we've got our machine set pretty low, under 200 volts, about 185 wire feed speed, and 17.5-ish volts. Play with the machine. That's something I suggest you start at 180, between 180 and 190, and between 17 and 18 volts. So
you're the expert here, but when I hear 1G, I hear just set it up to do it as easily and as quickly as possible.
Basically,
however you want.
Yeah, the goal here is to get certified. So make
like
it easy on yourself.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and run this downhill. All right, so we've got our root in here. All right, we see no bevel edge. All right, we've penetrated appropriately. Clean all the soot and silicone off there. All right, but this is what you're looking for. You're looking for a flush to convex weld, no greater than 1/8. Depending on your inspector, you might be a stickler about it, or it's whatever the WPS says. I've seen some WPS say, you're allowed 5/32 or 3/16, believe it or not, reinforcement. But, we always want to go for minimal penetration above flush with the base metal. So you're just looking for a consistent weld that penetrates all the way through, eclipses both edges of the bevel. What we'll show you in a minute here is how we're going to fill it up with flux core and cap it off with some stringers. Basically, the goal here is just fill it up. You can do a side to side motion, oscillate your puddle over that root. You can run a stringer if you want. At this point, the name of the game is get it filled up and make sure that the cap is within tolerance. So you can, like I said, this is a 1G test, so you can drag it, right, and weld it flat, or you can push it uphill. This is flux core, so I do not recommend that you run this downhill. It does not work well. Also, it'll trap slag and drip. So try to weld this in a 1G position as much as you can. So if you can only weld about 6, maybe 5 inches at a time, then that's what you got to do. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to weave over this guy side to side.
Nice.
All right, so we have officially put our hot pass in. That's the pass after the root. It's a flux core pass. So you can see we've got a tie in here, here, here. So use the roll to your advantage. You don't want to make it hard on yourself. So what we're going to do next now is we're going to put another weave pass in there. You do have the option of running 2 stringers. What that would look like is you tie a stringer in on this toe, and then you tie a stringer in on this toe. I am going to weave just because I feel that that is more efficient and gets the job done faster. But you're more than welcome to run 2 stringers. After that, we are going to put a 3-stringer cap on this and call it a day. All right, so we have put our weave pass in up to the edge. We still have our crisp edge on both sides. That's what we're looking for. So when we go to put a stringer cap on there, we have a visual aid. But we've come up to flush. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead and run our first weld on the edge of this. Now, we're not gonna place the wire outside. We're gonna place the wire inside and let the puddle roll over. You just wanna come out just a hair over or under a 16th, just under a 16th. So just let the puddle just roll over. Then we're gonna do the middle section, then we're gonna do the same thing to the other side. All right, so we have finished capping this off. We have 3 stringers. One thing I want to note is the staggering of the tie-ins. So you can see how the tie-ins build up. If you stagger them, it will be way less convexity. So choose a side, start, go up a little higher on your middle pass, go up a little higher on your final pass. What that does, that just spreads them out so that way you don't have a section that could cause you to be rejected if you're over 1/8. So scrape your BBs off, make sure it looks clean, wire brush it, make everything look pretty, and that's basically it. MIG root, flux core weave to fill, 3 stringer flux core cap in the 1G position. Remember things that help you: roll it to help yourself stay flat, stay in position, run the root downhill, and run the flux core stuff uphill and flat. So hopefully this video helped.
So I will say that was extremely fast. I knew it was going to be pretty quick. Dual shield flux core, as most of you guys know, I think that is the highest deposition rate of the common welding processes. And one of the other videos we filmed was essentially this, but all MIG, and this was, even with changing the wire, I'd venture to say, remarkably faster.
Yeah, insanely faster. Flux core has a very high deposition rate, puts down a lot of wire, and the good thing is, with it being a wire feed speed, if you want to put down more metal in a 1G position, just turn the machine up to feed out more wire and turn up the volts to accommodate that. So
wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, for demonstrating this.